Hi, my name is Wade Tolles. I'm a brand technical specialist for the IBM engineering tools. For the next few minutes, I'm going to show you how to synchronize an Azure DevOps feature type work item with a Doors NextGen feature type requirement. We'll start off with a little bit of background information. First of all, we're working on a Windows 2019 virtual server on Windows or VMware 15 desktop. We're using the 2019 server for both the Tasktop application as well as the JAZ requirements or engineering lifecycle management tools. I downloaded these from the jazz.net site and installed and configured them for the local machine. Similarly, I downloaded the Tasktop or Rational Lifecycle Integration Adapter from jazz.net. You can go to jazz.net. If you don't have an account, you can sign up for one for free and then go to Downloads, Adapters, Integration Adapters, Tasktop Edition, and select the latest version of the integration adapter. Once you download it and install it, then you'll be able to configure the synchronization of the applications. The next thing we want to talk about very briefly is I've gone ahead and started my engineering lifecycle management server. I've created a lifecycle environment or lifecycle project. In addition to creating a lifecycle project, I've actually configured the requirements project to be able to synchronize with the Azure DevOps project. And by that I mean I've configured the project attributes so that several of them align with the Azure DevOps attributes. To do that, you simply go to the administration gearbox here, click on Manage Project Properties, and add the appropriate types. In this case, under Feature, I add the attribute or artifact attributes of state and value area with the appropriate attribute data types being state field or state list type and value area type. Those fields and attributes align directly with the Azure DevOps fields which they are being synchronized with. Finally, in both the requirements tool, the IBM requirements tool, as well as the Azure DevOps tool, you'll note that there are a few requirements. I've gone through and created these and synchronized the tools so that I was able to show some synchronized values prior to walking you through that process. So now we'll go ahead and we'll look at the configuration for this by opening the Tasktop configuration. And the first thing that you'll note is, or that I want you to note, is that we have configured a task repository first. We added these task repositories by going in and entering the server information as well as a label for that server. We created a personal access token for the server. To do that, once you log into your Azure DevOps, you can go into the account user settings and configure personal access tokens. In our case, we wanted the access token to have full access, so we created that. We documented the token that was provided, and that is what was entered in the personal access token. The domain here is the domain of the Azure DevOps environment. In addition to this information, the tool will actually tell you that you will need to download the SDK and TEE zip files. You will not need to unzip those, but once you download them, the tool will ask you to browse for them. You'll select the zip file and then upload that zip file into the Tasktop tool. You'll need to configure a repository both for the ADO tool, and the DNG tool. In each case, you will also want to, once you've entered the server information, for the Jazz tool, you'll have to save the password. Once you've entered the server information, you'll want to validate the settings to make sure that all of the information is correct. If these settings are not valid, if it does not validate that the authentication credentials are valid, you'll need to make sure that you've got the right information entered into the tool and try again until you do have valid credentials. Another thing that you'll want to do prior to starting is check your debug options and make sure that the global logging threshold is at error. Otherwise, you'll get a whole lot of static in here or information in here that doesn't really matter. It's just debug information. After you've configured your local task repositories, you'll then go in and run the task mapping synchronization tool. That will walk you through adding a new the new features. For example, we'll go ahead and add the task mapping, and we'll say demo. And then you will select your first and second repositories. In our case, we selected the Azure DevOps, and we selected the Requirements Management tool. Once you've done that, you will use the existing repositories, and then you'll create initialization queries. These initialization queries are actually information that relates to the tool that you're synchronizing. It is the title of the synchronization, the collection or the domain, the project that you're synchronizing, and the type of information that you will be synchronizing. You'll have to do this for both the primary and the changes, which means that the initial creation of the synchronization or the feature will be replicated, and then you'll also have the tool looking for any changes to those initial synchronizations. So you'll need two configurations for each of the applications that you're synchronizing. For the DNG, again, you'll put a title in, you'll identify the project and the component, the artifact type will be feature in this case, format is text, and any changes at any time. And you'll do that for both the initial creation of the artifact as well as any changes made to the artifact. Once you've created the synchronization queries, the next thing that you'll need to do is to provide attribute mappings. Now, there are several required mappings. The very first one that shows up is the title to summary. That is the equivalent. The title for the Azure DevOps type is title, and the title for the DNG feature type is summary. The next required field, there are several required fields. For example, area path is required in the DevOps tool, but not in the DNG tool. There is no real equivalent for area path. However, in the CCM, if we were mapping this to the Jazz workflow tool, there would be both an area path and an iteration path, but it's not necessary in DNG. However, it is a required mapping in ADO, so we map that by entering it in ADO and not in DNG, and then for the caster, a literal value, and then within the fixed value, we enter our control plus our space bar, and that gives us the available field. Same thing with iteration path. There is no equivalent DNG attribute, so we enter literal value, and again hit our control space key to grab the most appropriate fixed value for the iteration path. The next required field is our state field. As I mentioned initially, I've created a state attribute type in the requirements tool that matches or is equivalent to the ADO. So we create a value mapping for that on a one-to-one basis between the two tools. Finally, the last required mapping is the value area mapping in ADO. We've also created an equivalent value area in the DNG tool, and for the value mapping, we have mapped those one-to-one as well. The last value that we map is our description, because we want to have information on how we describe each of those features in each of the tools. They are one-to-one, and we use a text markup transformation, which means that we take the Azure DevOps information or format for that, and we also enter the DNG format for the requirements. Once we've mapped all of our values, we can validate that our information is mapping correctly by opening our integration visualizer, and we'll see that one of these values appears to be off. That could simply be a matter of one of the attributes is missing, or one of the requirements is out of place. If we go back and look at our attribute mappings, we don't see any errors. So our information appears to be correct. What it is there are no mappings for these two areas. That's why there's some red there. Now that we have all of our values mapped, we can go ahead and we can start our synchronization. The tool will go in, identify our repositories, and update them based on what it saw last. If we don't get any errors, all right. Now, once we have our information synchronized, we'll go to our tools, and note we have in each of our tools or each of our applications, we have our environment configured. We have existing work items. We've got 5 work items, and we're going to go ahead. We'll first create a new work item, a feature in the Azure DevOps tool. We'll call that feature demo feature 6. New feature in ADO. Note we have a state of new, and we have a value area of business. New demo feature from the ADO app. And we'll save that. Go back to our work items. We now have 6. And if we look at our tool here, we should see demo feature 6. And we have new feature in ADO. We have new state. It is a business area. We can edit that. And we can say this was modified in DNG. And now if we go back to our ADO tool, we'll see our description modified in DNG. Now let's go ahead and create a new feature from the DNG side. We'll create a new feature, demo feature 7. And we'll hit OK. Let's go ahead and modify this as new feature from DNG. We'll set the state as new, and the value area as architectural, and we'll say done. And now we have a new feature, demo feature 7. Now if we go to our other tool, we should see demo feature 7. And we have a new state, and an architectural value. And then we can say modified in ADO. And when we save that and go back, modified in ADO. So we basically have our application that has been synchronized in both directions. So that's the end of our demo for now. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me at kenneth.tolles@ibm.com. Also, please connect with me on LinkedIn. Have a great day.